Good morning, equals. It is before 6 a.m. here, and it is already hot. Now I'm doing the, whoo, oh yeah, just trying to do this. And it's 5:26. Yes, I am a morning person. What I wanted to talk to you today was about the result of a meeting I went to on Wednesday afternoon. Yes, this is now Friday morning. Wednesday afternoon, that was Columbus. Columbus has received the second largest HUD grant to end homelessness across the country, and several $1 million. And one of their focuses is ending youth homelessness, and within that focus is a specific focus. They know, finally we're getting this recognition, that if they can end LGBT youth homelessness and youth homelessness for young people of color, they can pretty much wipe it out. Now, the usual trope, fancy word for the usual story, stereotypical story that gets told about homeless LGBT youth is that their parents, school, were hostile to them. And while that is true in a number of cases, to tell that as the only story does a great disservice to a lot of really good families, supportive, affirming families of LGBTQ youth who, through issues that are not the fault of the young person, like having a parent in prison and then the other parent's deported, or there being abuse, or socioeconomic instability. There's all kinds of reasons that an LGBTQ young person can be homeless. Family rejection is just one of those stories. So I just kind of want to make that point. Now, certainly if we can, one of the things that we would try to end would be the family rejection, because that certainly would take care of a number of LGBT youth. And in family rejection, I'm going to also kind of include the school environment. The school acts in parentis locus. I'm getting my Latin all messed up, but it's a fancy term that means in place of the parent. So in a way, they are also the family. So if we could get schools and families to be affirming places where a young person feels comfortable and safe, that would take care of a lot of LGBT youth homelessness. And then, of course, there's these other societal aspects that are going to be addressed as part of this effort to end homelessness in the Columbus area. So how do we deal with families? So I'm gonna address that, because that's the thing. I know. I was listening to True Colors Fund. That's it. The True Colors Fund, and I'll link them below, has some really interesting material that I believe you can just go sign in and you take some courses. They have little quizzes afterwards. I'm only a couple courses in, but certainly some of the more interesting things was talking about the 4 I's. So the 4 I's, let's see if I can do this from memory now, are ideology, institutional, interpersonal, and internal. So let's talk about the 4 I's. So the first I is ideological. Think of this as the isms. So there's racism, sexism, and for the sake of talking about LGBT youth homelessness, we're going to talk about cisgenderism and heterosexism. All right, going back, in case you haven't watched all of my videos, cisgender is the term for people whose gender identity, the way their brain understands them to be, matches the way their body has developed over time. And so that's cisgender. So cisgenderism is the idea that being cisgender is superior to being transgender. And then there is heterosexism, which is the ideology that being heterosexual or straight or attracted to the opposite sex is better than being gay, lesbian, or bisexual. So those are the 2 ideologies that, for the purposes of our conversation, are important. Certainly the parallels in racism and sexism are better known, but they're there. So when we're dealing with issues like youth homelessness, we need to address, as I mentioned, the 4 I's. So that's ideology. Institutionalism. So institutional, in this case, youth homelessness is going to be, well, one is going to be schools, where that don't always are not always supportive of LGBT students. Bullying and harassment are not addressed in a way that keeps the LGBT young person safe. Often the bully or the harasser claims a First Amendment right or something along these lines, and the school is hesitant or even complicit in the idea that if enough bullying and harassment, the LGBT child will change and not be LGBT. And or often the LGBT child leaves the school, which then the school kind of settles into, yeah, okay, that solves this problem, rather than addressing the bullying. Here's what I usually say to schools. Look, you have all these words posted all around your school: respect, kindness, caring, all of these kinds of words about your community culture, the culture of the school, the climate of the school, if you will. Just keep going with that, because kindness and respect and caring apply to your LGBT students as well. Institutional, as well as homeless shelters that are gendered spaces. So a transgender young person, particularly one who hasn't been able to change any gender markers on ID or birth certificates, etc., may be forced into a gendered space to which they do not feel comfortable or safe. So a trans boy, remember, a trans boy would be someone who was whose assigned gender at birth was female, may be placed in a female space, and that just doesn't feel comfortable. Maybe they forced, coerced, strongly encouraged to wear a particular uniform of some sort or a type of clothing that doesn't fit their gender. And the same in reverse, a trans girl, so somebody whose gender assigned at birth was male, may not be provided the clothing that matches their gender because they're in a gendered space that doesn't belong to them. So those are kinds of institutional problems we have, besides the fact that as institutionally, particularly in Ohio, there's not a lot of encouragement to get good training, good cultural competency training around LGBT young people. And so frontline workers are working with all of the stereotype and bias that they may have been brought up with, and they are putting that out there, and the young person is having to deal with that. And it's often why young people do not stay in any of the systems, foster care. So those ideology, institutional, and then there's interpersonal. So that's that stereotype and bias that frontline person is bringing to the exchange. When the young person might say, hey, look, I identify as a girl, please put me with the other girls, and the frontline person is like, well, no, your birth certificate says that you're male, so we're going to have to put you over here with all of the boys. And for that particular young person, let's think about it for a minute. That being with all the boys may not be a safe place. I'm told by people who actually work within these systems that female spaces tend to be a little bit more welcoming and accepting of gender non-conforming people, more so than male spaces. I just think societally, and this will make sense to you. So that's individual, interpersonal, and then there is internalized. So when a young person grows up hearing, how sinful, how possessed by the devil, how evil they are for being transgender, gender nonconforming, gay, lesbian, or bisexual, they may internalize that and think that they are bad, evil, possessed by the devil, whatever the message was, and then be acting out from that, kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, it might be, or hurting themselves in some way. We've talked about youth suicide, this idea they're told often enough that they are a burden, that they should never have been born. These kinds of messages, some young people will solve that by saying, yep, you're right, and they will take themselves out, or try to. So that's internalized homophobia. Okay, so those are the four. I think I'll stop there for today. That's probably enough. And next week we will talk about and I'd love your help with this, so next week be watching, what would a good space for LGBT young people who are experiencing homelessness or home insecurity, I'm still learning all the terms, look like. That'll be for next week. So goodbye, equals. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, hit the red subscribe button, click the little bell so that you get notified every time I put up a new video, including next week, when I'd like your help in figuring out what should I suggest to these folks in Columbus that would be a way to help end youth homelessness for LGBT young people and young people of color. Again, bye. Have a good weekend.